Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and it's a big one. We have Taylor Swift in the Tortured Poets department, and it's Billboard BREAKDOwn. I don't remember. There's a certain clarity that comes with weeks like this. Yes, the big obvious story, Taylor Swift once again breaking records with a massive double album project, utterly overwhelming the Hot 100. But I think the follow-up comes with whatever fills the gaps next week when a huge chunk of this falls away. Or hell, how much of it even falls out at all. For as much as a very loud chunk of the internet has been screaming that nobody likes this, and it's only doing so well because the cards are stacked in the deck in Taylor Swift's favor, which they are to some extent. Billionaires can cut their own deal with TikTok to ensure their promos not being compromised. You're also talking about the biggest pop star in the world, and a large chunk of that fan base that's a lot less online that doesn't hear all the bad buzz. And given that I really don't know the strategy for radio promo, it's going to be interesting to see what lasts. And honestly, I'm not complaining. I still like this album. But in the meantime, this is perhaps the easiest rundown through the top 10 we've had in some time, because all Taylor Swift. I basically can look at the streaming and sales charts to pinpoint the exact order. So from the top, Fortnight featuring Post Malone handily takes the number one, and with the added boost thanks to YouTube and a frankly ridiculous radio push already, I can see this lasting to number one next week. Down Bad at number two, and I Can Do It With a Broken Heart at number three. It's getting a sales boost to plug up its streaming ahead of the Tortured Poets department at number four. Then we got So Long London at number five, My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys at number six, But Daddy I Love Him at number seven, Florida with Florence and the Machine at number 8, Who's Afraid of Little Old Me at number 9, and Guiltiest Sin at number 10. When you can basically look at the streaming chart to rattle off this order, it falls out really damn fast. And naturally, that takes us to our losers and our dropouts. And you know what? Let's get through the latter big group first, because album bombs this big and hitting this high knock a lot of bigger songs into recurrence. Let's start off with the tracks that might recover, maybe, but have fallen well short of any year-end list if they don't. Like Bandit by Don Toliver, Training Season by Dua Lipa, and possibly Man Made a Bar by Morgan Wallen featuring Eric Church. That one's borderline. But then we got the big ones that are definitely not coming back, but they did comfortably make their year-end spots. Houdini by Dua Lipa, Paint the Town Red by Doja Cat, Where the Wild Things Are by Luke Combs, Water by Tyla, Snooze by SZA, and also Fast Car by Luke Combs. And now for our losers. Well, okay, here's the problem. We have nearly 60 of them. It does not make sense for me to just rattle through them all, especially when this episode is going to run long as it is. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to focus on the gains that saw their sharp losses and the songs that didn't really move much at all. I think there's more interesting stuff to say there. In the former group, Gotta Only by Floyd Menor and Chris MJ collapsed to 58. Good Luck Babe by Chapel Roan fell back to 62. I expect a rebound there. Similar case for Hell and Back by Bakar and Summer Walker at 72. Then we got the songs that might have some Nashville support, with Bulletproof by Nate Smith at 79, and Back Then Right Now by Tyler Hubbard at 73. Finally, we got a couple stragglers that lost their stray gains at the very bottom, like Two Name by Fuerza Regida at 87, and Let's Go by Key Glock at 90. But thanks to recurrency rules and the high-level impact of this album bomb, songs at the very bottom of the Hot 100 can skirt some of the impact, especially if they have radio support. So if we look at songs that didn't move that much, you get cuts like Spin You Around by Morgan Wallen at 98, or Halfway to Hell by Jelly Roll at 93, or Tucson Too Late by Jordan Davis at 92. Hell, in the country category, I'd probably say Wind Up Missing You holding at 76. It fits close to that. The other category are gains that have held, most not for the better, as we've got Feel It by David at 95 and Tell Your Girlfriend by Lay Banks at 66. But hey, a bar song Tipsy by Shabuzi actually saw growth at 27. It's on path to becoming a thing, and given how great that song is, I'm legit excited. Now that takes us to our one gain, There Were No Returns, and that is for FTCU by Nicki Minaj, which you can chalk up a big remix with Travis Scott, Chris Brown, and Sexy Red for a boost of 53. And I mean, it's a remix I've heard precisely zero buzz for. I don't think this gain's got any staying power, especially on the radio. But the story here, we know the album bomb Taylor Swift, we all know it, and with 31 songs debuting, we're absolutely in peak album bomb territory, and even then this is gonna go long because we got 15 new songs in the top 20. But outside of those, from the bottom up, Robin at 55, The Bolter at 47, Cassandra at 44, I Look in People's Windows at 39, Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus at 36, How Did It End at 35, I Hate It Here at 34, The Prophecy at 32, The Albatross at 30, I'm Gonna Get You Back at 26, The Black Dog at 25, So Long High School at 24, Thank You aIMee at 23, and Clara at 21. Alright, still a lot, but we're not exactly gonna start with Taylor Swift here. Number 96, Us Versus Them by Suicide Boys. Well, this is long overdue. For those of you who don't know, Suicide Boys are a Louisiana rap duo who have been on the cusp of charting on the Hot 100 for years now, as a consistently reliable streaming act that tends to get stranded in the bubbling undercharts, never quite breaking through. And thus I kind of appreciate the irony on a week that's competing against Taylor Swift, they saw some actual penetration. Now, full disclosure, I have heard more around this group than their music directly, so I was a little bit surprised how much I like this. The ominous watery keys against the scratching and boom bap percussion to accent their very nasal flows that kind of remind me a lot of Schoolboy Q. The menace is palpable. It immediately conveys that bleak, creepy nihilism that underscores the content. Where the drug abusing flexes and depravity, it's more a comment on them than anyone else. I mean, it's interesting that the song then doesn't nearly go as dark in its content as it could. If there is violence, it's inherently self-destructive, speak of the name, and the material success isn't really satisfying them, which I find more interesting even if the song is more interested in making the picture than adding more dimension to it. That said, I think it's effective. Pretty good song. Worth a shot. Number 51, The Manuscript by Taylor Swift.
Of the entire torrid affair, they compared their licenses. He said, I'm not a donor, but I'd give you my heart if you needed it.
Well, might as well add this one to the pantheon of fantastic bonus closing cuts along with Dear Reader, cause holy shit, this is devastating. And it's such a spare and soft focused song, and the pianos and very delicate arrangement, and still it starts to ramp up into that bridge, and then it fades away for the coda. This could have swung for the fences, but it's a rare case of not needing to. Aaron Dessner just nails the arrangement here, it's striking. But I love how the opening verse is very meta between two songwriters who will inevitably talk about a possible relationship, and there's this hint of genuine collegiate earnestness in the flirting. It's the best point on the entire album where the whole poets department element feels like it's in play, but then it's over. And then you get daydreams of what it could have been and where emotionally she actually winds up going, which then has her second guess all of the old relationships. There's a real danger of being told that you are wise beyond your years, and she's reckoning with that. But she finds a way to work through it through her art. And it comes together. She contextualizes that pain. Maybe she can move on. And then we get the final sad lines where the story, it's now for the audience. It's not for her anymore. I mean, I said this in the review proper. It's the often unspoken limitation of relying so much on autobiography in art. Not just because you have to reopen wounds over and over in performing that art, but you give a part of yourself in that conversation that can leave you feeling a little hollow on the other side. It's a very different experience for the world to enjoy at a distance what you actually live. And I think Taylor Swift finally gets that. It's an incredibly powerful song, best of the bonus cuts easily. If there's anything worth that project hearing, well, beyond Cassandra and the Albatross and the Bolter, it's this. Phenomenal song. Number 46, Peter by Taylor Swift.
Come find me words from the mouths of babes, promises, oceans deep, but never to keep.
You know, the funny thing is I don't think there are that many outright duds on the Tortured Poets department as a whole. Many of those highlighted as some glaring weak points I might wind up defending, and there's a bunch of them coming. So let's point at one that's not getting a lot of attention that I personally think is a little uninspired. Maybe it's the overexposure of the Peter Pan metaphors on spare piano ballads. Maybe it's thinking it's a little too obvious when talking about the dirtbag childishness that Matty Healy showcases, especially as Taylor Swift has used this metaphor before. Maybe it's the vocal mastering that personally I find a little shakier than it should be, and a really spare arrangement that isn't quite as strong enough on its own. I mean, for me it's the definition of a bonus throwaway. It's not precisely bad, just not worth revisiting. Number 20, I Can Fix Him, No Really I Can by Taylor Swift.
He's my man, but your good Lord doesn't need to lift a finger. I can fix him, no, really I can.
I've seen a lot of folks highlight this as the closest that Swift got to a full Lana Del Rey song on this album, and yeah, I definitely hear the comparison. Staying near her husky, soft-spoken register with some of the upward inflections and the gauzy backing vocals, the echoing guitar and the ramshackle percussion, and where she recognizes from a mile away that this guy is trouble when he walks in, and yet she's drawn to it anyway. Despite everything, there's some emotional reality there. Of course, the difference is that while the bad taste bad boy traction is there, the final swerve comes in the last line of the song where she realizes, no, she can't fix this dude. And any passing glamour, it's not worth it. At this point of the album, it's the pit in your stomach realization that no, it's not gonna work. And while the song is a little muted for my taste, I think it's pretty solid for what it is. Good stuff. Number 19, Push-Ups by Drake.
Number one, I had to put it in your hand. You pussies can't get booked outside America for Nan. I'm out in Tokyo because I'm big in Japan.
So I know my reputation as a music critic, especially when it comes to Drake and Billboard Breakdown, and I could have choreographed where he was going to put push-ups on the DSPs for a passing nudge at Taylor Swift, and then launch his first real set of jabs at everyone coming for him. So I can imagine there's going to be a lot of people who think I'm going to come down really hard on this because I personally prefer Kendrick Lamar as a rapper. But this is beef. Drake has had his fair share of fights, both wins and losses. I'm not the biggest fan of how he moves in beef, but I know where he can be effective. Duppy Freestyle is actually a really good song if the story of Adidon isn't as much of a systemic dismantling as it is, with some of the most biting lines in rap history, and thus I'm actually comfortable saying that Drake did drop a good song here. The brittle synths and pianos behind the trap percussion, it's rough, but in rap beef, I'm a little bit more forgiving when it comes to the mastering. About the only time I will ever say that, and Drake gets some good shots off, given that he has to go at everyone. The issue here is that the real fight is between Kendrick and Drake, and to clear the field, Drake's got to get everyone else out of the way with some pithy lines and slick shots while trying to bait Kendrick Lamar into showing more of his hand. No haymakers were being thrown here, and I bet Drake has them. You can also tell with whom Drake is trying to maintain more of a relationship. Metro gets the most immediately recognizable punch, but there's only a few words for Future. I mean, come on, there's way too many shared women between them. That could get ugly very fast. Then there's a couple lines for The Weeknd and his larger team, and that's some Toronto smoke, which, given I'm in the city, it's a deeper rabbit hole, pun only partially intended. Then a scathing set of lines for Rick Ross, of which, of course, Ross responded, and that whole thing got very silly very fast, and I immensely enjoyed it. And then a shot at Ja Morant, who really should have just been ignored, just like A$AP Rocky, J. Cole's whinging, and Kanye West inserting himself in conversations he doesn't belong for some very obvious clout chasing. But for Kendrick, there are good jabs here. The lines about label exploitation and SZA specifically, it proves that Drake also saw all that instability with TDE and Interscope. He is right about Kendrick seeking out some questionable pop features, although that does open up the door for Kendrick Lamar to actually bring in Taylor Swift, which, given Taylor Made, seems to be something that Drake wants to get in front of fast because he will lose that wealth battle. And the whole line, what's a prince to a king, he a son, that's a great flip, along with mocking those goofy-ass push-ups Kendrick Lamar was doing in the park. But look, I don't like all of this. I hate Drake further validating anything around Kai Cenat and DJ Academics. Some of these lines are a lot clunkier than they should be, and Drake, I thought you learned your lesson, buddy, the last time you mentioned someone's wife in a song. You wound up putting out a statement about blackface, J Prince had to squash this for you, and then you were whining on a couch with LeBron. But again, I know this is a jab. It's not everything Drake has in the tank. He's baiting Kendrick Lamar's response, and I mean, my guess was that it was going to come in a couple of weeks, but literally as I was writing this entry, Kendrick Lamar dropped a 6-minute diss record called Euphoria on YouTube, and fucking god, that was everything it needed to be as a haymaker. Holy shit. We will get to that a later time because undoubtedly it's going to chart, but this was a good song. I don't think that should be overpassed. Beef is now on. Clock is going. Number 14, The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived by Taylor Swift.
A message to the smallest man who ever lived.
You know, I think a lot of the hyperbolic headlines saying that Taylor Swift is responsible for all the disses flying in 2024, it's badly misinformed. I think it's still Megan's title to lose, to be frank. But then I go to this, where the song title is one of the most scathing things you can direct at a man, and recognize that Swift has some bars here. Against a gentle piano backdrop and the steadily coursing beat, she rips into Matty Healy with venom. His pretentiousness, his lies, his emotional manipulation, his drug abuse, how he treats women, and then the cowardice when confronted with any of it. What Taylor Swift highlights is how so much of this is driven on a very fragile ego and a veneer of glamour. And what I really like is that Swift holds herself somewhat accountable for buying in. She looked past so much bullshit for this fling, only to be then treated badly, but once it wasn't forbidden, there was no spark. The dagger line is that she'll forget you, she'll never forgive you. And when that branch ramps up, yeah, great song. I'm here for it. Number 13, The Alchemy by Taylor Swift.
Reserved for me, honestly, who are we to fight the alchemy?
The interesting thing about this song is that it's the only one on the standard edition where her current relationship with Travis Kelce is in view, with deliberate references to finally being the winner and meeting someone she thinks is on her level. It's not quite mastermind, but more of a victory lap and borderline refutation to that song, with the reference of the pseudoscience of alchemy is quite telling, because love is not science, it's closer to magic, and she can't control it the way that she once thought, but hey, they're still at the top, why not revel in the moment? But if you're gonna go for broke on that, I don't know, I think the production might need a little bit more grandeur and swell. The verses feel very brittle and spare, a little too watery for their own good. And while the joyous backing vocals add some heavenly touches to the hook, none of the instruments really pop for me there, and it feels like every switch to the verses really deflates the energy. I don't know, I do think this is good, I like the content, but as the penultimate track on the standard edition of the album, could afford to go a little harder. That's all. Number 12, Love of My Life by Taylor Swift.
Pick of time, you low down boy, you stand up guy, you Holy Ghost, you told me I'm the love of your life.
Now, the tricky thing about a spare heartbreak ballad like this, leaning pretty much on piano and some touches of strings on the outro, is the open question of who it's actually about, Joe Alwyn or Matty Healy, and my interpretation is that it could be either or both, capturing the fluttery heartache of it actually kind of working, buying into the classy image in the moments where you could see your life with them, only to see how phony and duplicitous it ultimately might be, even if the love was real. And a lot of the details ring true here for me, be they the references that she was the one to turn their lives around, or how maybe she shouldn't have re-examined any of it for her art, when she can then feel the mocking laughter of ghost of what might have been, with the line about being a bland goodbye just stinging like hell, because look, a lot of relationships do not end climactically. Boring whimper, not a bang, and if you think in narrative, it'll piss you off. And while I think the flip of Love of My Life to Loss of My Life is a little bit thin to anchor a song with some solid description, I still think it works. Not one of my favorites, but still good. Number 11, Fresh Out of the Slammer by Taylor Swift.
Home to you. Fresh out the slammer, I know who my first call will be too.
One lingering fact I think I missed when I reviewed the album is that Taylor Swift and Matty Healy actually dated for a bit briefly in the mid-2010s. They had a flirtation. That post-Joe Alwyn breakup was there as a pre-existing connection that they could be reunited. And that seems to underscore the arc of this song with the reverb blues guitar that honestly feels kind of runny against the warping synths and the touches of strings, as Swift just runs through some quasi-triplet flows describing her escape from Alwyn to Healy. Yes, the prison metaphor is a little bit ridiculous and kind of overworked. Swift is a better writer when she actually claims her own agency, although given the implied chilliness, I get why Healy would be such an appealing, passionate rebound. And you know, I'm not quite sure the switch up for the outro works as she and Healy try to imagine what a future might look like together, but there's this core of relief to the song that really resonates. It's not one of my favorites, again, but I get why it works. Number 10, Guiltiest Sin by Taylor Swift. One of the complaints I heard about this album is that everyone was sick of Jack Antonoff and this sound, and that it all sounds the same. So when I get to this song, which could have easily been a deep cut on Red or 1989 with that melody line or hook, I'm starting to wonder what the hell people even want. But the sound here is only half the story, with the gentle guitars and the vocal overdubs and the spikes of echoing synth. The other half is that this is a love song from Matty Healy that is intensely conscious of the risk it represents. Something to break the boredom, a yearning passion that can feel dangerous for how uncertain it is. She doesn't know if he feels the same or if it's real. A lot of this she's kept predominantly in her head because actions are what ultimately matter, but if she can delude herself into believing there's long-term potential, maybe it's worth it? I mean, the sadness to it is that ultimately her suspicions were correct. It was doomed to fail. But the freedom to make the bad decision matters just as much on a song that feels so very horny in a lot of its language, a lot more sexual than Swift normally is, and oh boy, that's a layer of subtext that should be unpacked. Overall, I actually think this is a pretty great song. Probably deserves more attention than it's getting. On that note, number 9, Who's Afraid of Little Old Me by Taylor Swift.
Crash the party like a record scratch as I scream. Who's afraid of little old me? You should be.
I think this might be my most contentious opinion about this album, and that I think this is one of the best on the project. Not particularly close either. For one, it also feels like a culmination. Taylor Swift has not so quietly been showing her rougher, wilder edges in her writing for years now, if you've been paying attention. And by that I mean the desire to be way more edgy when it's questionable how much of it she can really pull off. I mean, that's the biggest swing in this territory for a while, where the Reputation parallel is the starkest and the camp is highest, with the funereal keys, the echoing guitars, the strings, the percussion ramping up. But there's a different edge compared to Reputation. That goes back to Mad Woman on Folklore, where women attempting to flex their power outside of their designated lane, they're painted as crazy or unreliable. And this is Swift leaning into that. And let's be clear, even though I can appreciate the wild, borderline fantastical lyricism, it's not like she isn't making some valid points. The two-faced affection that's more controlled than genuine care, a work environment and stress that very few can fathom at the height of her fame, even with all the wealth, the grandstanding about her sincerity alongside dismissals of her art as just being dumbed down entertainment, and the fact that she's been, let's call it like it is, groomed for all this since childhood, and confronting the abnormality of that with some of the first barbs that Swift has ever thrown in her family's direction means this is going to a different place. And what makes this song work compared to, say, Look What You Made Me Do, is that despite all the high camp of the execution, I'm capable of recognizing some notes of paranoid truth in all of it. And given I have a platform and I faced some degrees of backlash in the past, on an emotional level, I feel it. But again, I'm on the fringe. She's at the epicenter. And crazy gets treated a little different, especially when it's paired with, oh, she's safe, she's edgeless, she's no threat, we have her contained. And the fact that it then spilled over into her love life beyond her art, where she has been so desperate to find someone to make it work, that screams a bridge too far. In other words, it can play as pure melodrama. You can enjoy it on that level, but I get how it strikes something way deeper. Powerful shit. Number 8, Florida by Taylor Swift featuring Florence and the Machine.
Florida,
I mean, sometimes for me, it's set up to win. I knew when Florence and the Machine worked with Jack Antonoff on Dance Fever, there was a chance Florence would meet up with Taylor Swift, and this collab is probably the most even-handed that Swift has had since Exile. I don't quite put this in the same ballpark. They're doing very different things. Exile had grace and dignity and maturity, and with this, instead, we got a blood-soaked hedonistic escape this side of Spring Breakers. And like that movie, this song has kind of split some audiences, especially among those who don't think it really feels very Florida. I mean, I hear that. I'm not sure I agree. This is less a party than a swampy murder anthem, where old wealthy people retire to Florida and criminals flee to start over. Cute parallel, I dig it. But there's also this twisted, dark humor to it. Two divas drunk on their own pitch-black escapist fantasies and probably drunk on more. And given how much escape is factored into the themes of the album, there's resonance there. But to be blunt, so much of this just also comes on the performance and the execution. I love the brittle acoustics and pulsating groove that builds to that huge percussive hook. I love how Florence Welch is given the air to completely take over that second verse, and she has the pipes to fit in that ramshackle vibe opposite Taylor. And as the backing vocal runs pile in, they blend unbelievably well, especially for that final hook. It's probably one of my favorite crescendos I have heard in 2024. So yeah, absolutely adore this song. On the majority of the days, it's my favorite on the album. I think it's a little too off-kilter and bombastic to become a hit on the modern Hot 100, but hey, I've been proven wrong before. It could happen. Although, come to think of it, it might be more likely for number 7, But Daddy I Love Him by Taylor Swift.
but Daddy, I love him. I'm having this baby. No, I'm not, but you should see your faces.
I've seen some folks describe this as a sequel to Love Story, but man, it feels so much bigger than just a fairy tale. It's the album's centerpiece, running damn near 6 minutes as she runs through this whirlwind romance that has considerably less approval from everyone else around her, and at some point, it becomes less the love story and more a giant middle finger given to the fan base that might speculate and critique of Taylor Swift's relationships. And again, some of that also now includes her family that only wants what's best for her. The most telling line in the entire song is growing up precocious sometimes means not growing up at all. And there's truth to that. When you're exceedingly talented and successful and even privileged as a white woman, let's not run away from that. There's a loaded societal critique that should be unpacked there, especially for someone coming out of the South and country. It can lead to feeling infantilized, coddled, smothered while being told that you have it all, it's what's best for you. And Taylor Swift finally being sick of that shit's been a long time fucking coming. And yes, of course, it's absolutely high melodrama running on pure naked emotion. The production building so much swell to it is a huge factor. I love how the acoustics ramp off the strings and the galloping percussion. But again, high camp. There is humor here to balance out the sting of some of these barbs. Telling her parents that she's having this baby as a shocking joke just to see their faces is buck wild. Then the song is tempered by the larger reality that the relationship didn't really work in the end, which means I can kind of laugh in the moment for how exuberant and freewheeling it is. It's a tour de force that I really do love. Not my favorite, but on any given day, it could be. Number 6, My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys by Taylor Swift.
My boy only breaks his favorite toys.
Now, if we're talking about the song from the album proper that I really don't like, it's this one. The muted, stuttering patter from the drum machines, the oily pulse of the synths, they had some potential, especially as that brighter melody came in, especially on the outro. But this is an example of Swift working the metaphor so hard that it loses some impact in this love-hate relationship. There is weight in describing the shift in power dynamic that comes with a bad relationship, where it almost feels like you're trying to hold it together and you're going through the motions even as he's neglectful, borderline abusive, under the guise of love, especially highlighting how in his exit he tries to sell it as being better for everyone. But it feels more depersonalized and one-sided here, especially as Swift's more interesting songs about bad relationships show a messier culpability instead of just him playing with you. Honestly, it feels like a cut that could have fit on Reputation. That's not exactly a compliment this time. It really comes across as clunky, does not work for me. Easy skip. Number 5, So Long London by Taylor Swift.
You'll find someone.
Yeah, this is the track that feels like the definitive end to the Joe Alwyn relationship, of course sitting alongside You're Losing Me, but this sound encapsulates more of what that relationship has meant. The ethereal vocals, the fragmented synths, the very fast padded percussion, and the slow burn heartbreak that comes with a relationship that is collapsing in slow motion. There are wells of emotion on this track that feel very deeply buried but present, very English in that regard, where she's trying to cling to a relationship that is falling apart in quiet miscommunications and emotional isolation, and then eventually she just has to give up. There's nothing more left that she can give. And what I love about the song is how truly angry it is. She gave years of her life and her youth to all this, and she would have seen it all the way. It taints how she saw a city that she loved, and for it to now feel so inconsequential and bland at the very end, it's infuriating for someone who seeks meaning. A cold slap in the face when she thought that he was so much better. For me, it was the first truly excellent song on the album. Great cut. Number 4, The Tortured Poets Department by Taylor Swift.
Straight from the tortured poets department. I think some things I never say. Like who uses typewriters anyway?
Yeah, so I was among the people openly mocking the title of this album, and for good reason. It's melodramatic as all hell. If you're placing a lot of weight on Taylor Swift as a poet compared to her compositional skills or theatricality, you might run into trouble. And yet the reason I like this song is that it's the first solid clue of how much Taylor Swift knows that she herself is full of shit. The song is on its face absurd. The nonsense with typewriters, saying that Charlie Puth should be a bigger artist, the play with rings at the table, the reference to both Jack Antonoff and Lucy Dacus, the latter of whom is smarter than both of them and has to roll her eyes at Maddie Healy being the melodramatic Ponzi is. I mean, they literally call themselves modern idiots. She references trolling on the final post-chorus. The piss is being taken, and I think Taylor Swift has a sense of humor. And yet what I like is that there is still a core of campy earnestness where Swift can find the emotional truth amidst all of it. I wouldn't call it a personal favorite of mine on the album, the keys and gleaming synth against the thrumming bass and spare percussion. It feels very soft rock. I wish it would ramp up the drama a little bit more. It's a shade gauzy and soft focus for me. But you know, if I think you want a key to unlocking this album, it's here. Really good song. Number 3, I Can Do It With a Broken Heart by Taylor Swift.
It's an art. You know you're good when you can't even do it with a broken heart.
Okay, look, I'm not surprised that this looks to be being primed as the next big pop single. I implied it when I reviewed the album, and I mean with that shuddering, fast-paced synth imported from a Bleachers album that builds into a very chirpy, bouncy hook, with the lyrics all about holding it together with the reality that so many of her songs circle heartbreak, where she has to relive some of that angst alongside songs co-written by said ex while on the very biggest stages. I mean, I really get the audience is gonna connect with this a lot. I've seen folks call this a girl boss anthem that of course Taylor can still slay even despite falling apart inside. And yet I get it, but it feels a little cheap as a criticism. Feels disconnected from the folks who have to go back to work after you get your heart broken, especially in service jobs where you gotta fake the smile and the positive attitude. And I mean, I can have some empathy for Taylor Swift, who also has to do that while traveling away from friends and family, performing in a multi-million-dollar position where if she fails, there's consequences. Again, it's not really a favorite of mine, but it is decent. I get why it works. Similar to number 2, Down Bad by Taylor Swift.
Everything comes out, teenage petulance. Fuck it if I can't have him. I might just die, it would make no difference.
Yeah, this also plays to a lot of that same formula. The fragmented warble of synth around the bells and fizzy percussion, and combined with the synthesized backing vocals, is trying to evoke a very spacey vibe, with the central metaphor of alien encounters probably being the first major chart crossover to do so since E.T. by Katy Perry. And honestly, I think Swift does it better by playing into how the relationship is perceived. It can feel like that magical moment that pulls you into a different world, but then you're left behind back on Earth. And even if it changed your life, nobody's gonna believe you. You feel gaslit, you feel hollow. And here's the thing, Swift also knows that that's all hyperbolic. Calling the song down bad and the whole crying at the gym line has already gotten the same spurt of girl boss mockery. But apparently when Taylor Swift was training for the Eras tour, she used to run on the treadmill and practice singing simultaneously so she had her conditioning. And given the content and the emotional weight of these songs, I kind of get how that would be really fucking hard. Then even if she recognizes it all as teenage petulance and melodrama, there's that flip of New Romantics, where being stranded, it isn't quite as romantic as it used to be. Now again, it's not a personal favorite of mine. I think it's missing another gear. It feels very optimized for streaming. I don't think it's our biggest swing, but it has grown on me. Similar to number 1, Fortnight by Taylor Swift featuring Post Malone.
Sometimes ask about whoever, now you're in my backyard. Turn into good neighbors, your wife waters flowers. I wanna kill her.
There was a part of me that was dreading this album entirely because of this song with Post Malone. Putting him in the same sonic universe as Taylor seemed like a recipe for disaster. We saw what happened with Beyonce and Cowboy Carter, and yet this somehow works. Even if I do think some of the impact comes with it feeling like a culmination of things that I have been saying for years. The functioning alcoholic line in the first 4 bars, it rings very loud now that given I've been referencing it since 2017. Also makes sense why Post Malone makes sense here at all. Honestly, he does sound better than when he did on Levi's Jeans. I think his warble is better blended against the spare pulsating synth and twinkling groove, even if I would argue that Taylor Swift doesn't really give him a lot to do compared with Florence and the Machine. But the focus is on her, where her instability is more in frame. I mean, the ex might have been able to move on to more smooth and cordial times where her rebound was a temporary high. And while she can fake a smile at his champagne problems, she wants to kill his new partner. And then eventually him. The tail end of an abbreviated love that she's still very much processing. I tend to think the song functions more as an overture to the album, given the reference to Florida on the outro. And it also feels a little bit streamlined for streaming purposes and pop. The title of the song does not help matters for search engine optimization. But honestly, there's enough great lines here that allow me to call this a good song. I am okay with it. I'll take it too. But that's our week. My God, there's a lot here. Let's wrap it up fast. And it's all about Taylor on both sides of the docket. Worst is My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys. Dishonourable mention goes to Peter. Best of the week, I'm going with Florida with Florence and the Machine. Shocker. But we have a close tie for the honorable mention between But Daddy I Love Him and The Manuscript. And man, really between the top 3 is so close. Next week, well, okay, the fallout from all this, it's going to be insane. Stay tuned for that. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you.